7-year-old boy calls 911 to arrest his stepfather after hearing his mother scream. When the police arrives, the sheriff is shocked by the scene he witnessed. Lucas Mitchell lay perfectly still in his bed, his small heart pounding against his dinosaur print pajamas. At 7 years old, he had already mastered the art of listening through walls. The shouting downstairs had started exactly 23 minutes ago. He knew because he'd been watching his digital T-Rex clock, its green numbers casting an eerie glow across his bedroom. "You're being ridiculous, James." His mother's voice carried through the heating vent, a tremor in it that Lucas had learned to recognize over the past few months. It was the same tremor she had when she told him everything was just fine at breakfast, even though her hands shook while pouring his cereal. The old phone, his mother's previous iPhone that she'd given him, for emergencies only, felt heavy under his pillow. Lucas slid his hand beneath the cotton dinosaur-covered pillowcase, his fingers wrapping around the device. He remembered the day she'd given it to him 3 months ago. "Sometimes, sweetie," she had said, her voice steady but her eyes darting toward the door. "Grown-ups need help too. If you ever feel scared, if you ever think mommy needs help, you can use this to call 911. But only in real emergencies. Okay?" A crash from downstairs made him flinch. It sounded like breaking glass, probably another accident that would be cleaned up before breakfast tomorrow, with his stepfather James apologizing and bringing home takeout from their favorite pizza place. "Look what you made me do." James's voice boomed through the house. "Always pushing me, Sarah. Always testing my patience." Lucas closed his eyes, trying to remember what his teacher, Ms. Peterson, had taught them about breathing exercises during their Mindfulness Monday sessions. In through the nose, out through the mouth. But his breath caught in his throat when he heard the sound, that awful sound of flesh meeting flesh that he'd heard twice before. His mother's scream pierced the night. Without hesitation, Lucas pulled out the phone. His hands were trembling so badly that he had to try twice to press the power button. The screen lit up, illuminating his face in the dark room. He could hear heavy footsteps downstairs, his mother's muffled pleading. Another crash. In through the nose, out through the mouth, he whispered to himself, unlocking the phone with shaking fingers. He'd practiced this, hadn't he? Late at night, when everyone was asleep, he'd rehearsed what he would do, what he would say. Just in case. The numbers seemed to swim before his eyes. 911. His finger hovered over the call button as James's voice thundered up the stairs. "Where do you think you're going?" Another scream, closer this time. Running footsteps on the stairs. Lucas pressed call. The phone rang once, his heart threatening to burst from his chest. What if James heard? What if he came upstairs? What if? 911, what's your emergency? The calm, professional voice of a woman filled his ear. Lucas opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Downstairs, something heavy hit the wall. "Hello? This is 911. Is anyone there?" Lucas swallowed hard, gathering every ounce of courage in his 7-year-old body. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "My mommy needs help. He's hurting her again." There was a brief pause on the other end. "I'm here to help, sweetheart. Can you tell me your name and where you are?" Another crash downstairs. His mother's voice, pleading, "James, please. The neighbors will hear." Lucas clutched the phone tighter, tears rolling down his cheeks. "I'm Lucas. Lucas Mitchell. We live at 1487 Maple Street. Please hurry. My stepdad. He's really angry tonight." "You're very brave, Lucas. I'm sending help right now. Can you find a safe place to hide while we wait for the police?" Lucas's eyes darted to his closet, his usual hiding spot during these episodes. But before he could move, heavy footsteps started ascending the stairs. Each step seemed to shake the entire house. "He's coming upstairs," Lucas whispered into the phone, terror gripping his chest. "He's coming dash," the hallway floorboard creaked. The one right outside his bedroom door. Time seemed to freeze as Lucas stared at his bedroom door, the phone pressed against his ear like a lifeline. The old floorboard outside let out another protesting groan. "Lucas!" The 911 dispatcher's voice was barely audible. "Are you still there, sweetheart?" He couldn't respond. His breath caught in his throat as a shadow passed beneath his door, but it kept moving, accompanied by his mother's voice. "James, please, let's just go back downstairs. We can talk about this." Their footsteps retreated, and Lucas released the breath he'd been holding. "I'm here," he whispered into the phone. He didn't come in. "Good, Lucas. You're doing great. The police are on their way. Can you get to your closet without making any noise?" Lucas slid off his bed, his sock-covered feet silent against the hardwood floor. The dinosaur nightlight cast strange shadows as he crept toward his closet, still clutching the phone. He could hear Sheriff David Anderson's voice crackling through the dispatcher's radio in the background, reporting his position. 5 minutes out from Maple Street, the closet door opened with a slight squeak that made Lucas freeze. But the argument downstairs had grown louder again, masking any sound from his room. He slipped inside, pulling his knees to his chest as he settled between his winter coats and school backpack. "I'm in my closet," he whispered. "Perfect. Lucas, stay there. Can you tell me what's happening now?" Through the closet's slatted doors, Lucas could see his bedroom window. Red and blue lights were starting to reflect off the neighbor's house across the street, but they were still too far away. A sudden crash from downstairs made him jump. His mother's voice, higher now with panic. "No, James, put that down." "Ma'am," Lucas whispered urgently into the phone, remembering how his mother had taught him to be polite even in emergencies. "I think he has something. My mom sounds really scared. The police are almost there, Lucas. Just 2 more minutes. You're being so brave." The sound of breaking glass echoed through the house, followed by his mother's scream. Lucas pressed his hands over his ears, but he couldn't block it out. Tears streamed down his face as he rocked back and forth in the darkness of the closet. "Make it stop," he pleaded into the phone. "Please make it stop." The dispatcher's voice remained steady. "They're turning onto your street now, Lucas. Can you see the lights?" Lucas peered through the slats again. The red and blue lights were closer now, reflecting off the fresh snow that had fallen earlier that evening. He could hear the muffled sound of sirens. Downstairs, the argument suddenly stopped. In the silence, Lucas could hear car doors slamming outside. "He knows they're here," Lucas whispered, his heart pounding. "I can hear him running." Heavy footsteps pounded through the house. The back door slammed. His mother's voice, desperate. "Lucas, Lucas, stay in your room." The front door splintered with a massive crash that shook the entire house. Multiple voices filled the air. "Police! Nobody move! Lucas!" The dispatcher's voice was urgent now. "The police are in your house. Stay in your closet until the line went dead." Lucas stared at the phone's black screen in horror. The battery had finally died. Footsteps thundered up the stairs, different from James's. More of them. A deep voice called out, "Clear the upper floor. Find the boy." Lucas pressed himself further into the corner of his closet, surrounded by the familiar smell of his winter coat and school clothes. The bedroom door burst open, and a beam of light swept across the room. "Lucas!" A man's voice, authoritative but gentle. "Lucas Mitchell? This is Sheriff Anderson. You can come out now, son. You're safe." But Lucas couldn't move. His body felt frozen in place as the closet door slowly opened, flooding his hiding spot with light. Through his tears, he saw a tall figure crouching down, badge glinting in the dinosaur nightlight's glow. The sheriff's face, when it came into view, was kind but lined with concern. "Hey there, brave boy," he said softly, holstering his flashlight. "I heard you made a very important phone call tonight." Behind the sheriff, through his bedroom doorway, Lucas could see more officers in the hallway. And then his mother's voice, shaking but alive. "Lucas? Baby, where are you?" But before Lucas could respond, before he could run to his mother's voice, another sound cut through the night, 3 sharp gunshots from somewhere behind the house, followed by screams. Sheriff Anderson's face hardened as he reached for his radio, still keeping his body between Lucas and the door. "Shots fired," he barked into the device. "Officers respond to the rear of the house. Status of the suspect unknown. I repeat, shots fired, Through his bedroom window, Lucas could see more red and blue lights arriving, casting wild shadows across his dinosaur-covered walls. The night, he realized, was far from over. The emergency room at Boston General Hospital buzzed with fluorescent-lit activity at 2 a.m. Lucas sat on the edge of an examination bed, his dinosaur pajamas now covered by a too-large police department sweatshirt. A kind-faced nurse named Jenny was checking the small cut on his arm, a souvenir from when he'd stumbled rushing to his mother after the gunshots. "Just a scratch," Jenny said softly, applying a Band-Aid decorated with cartoon dinosaurs. "You're quite lucky they had these special ones left." But Lucas wasn't paying attention to the Band-Aid. His eyes were fixed on the curtain separating his bay from the one next door, where he could hear his mother's muffled voice talking to the doctors. He'd only caught a glimpse of her when they'd first arrived enough to see the bruising on her face, the way she held her right arm close to her body. Sheriff Anderson stood at the foot of Lucas's bed, his uniform still bearing traces of snow and mud from the chase through their backyard. The lines in his face seemed deeper in the harsh hospital lighting. "You did everything right tonight, son," the sheriff said, his voice gentle but heavy with something Lucas couldn't quite understand. "The shots you heard? That was your stepfather firing at one of my deputies. Nobody was hurt. We got him before he could do any real damage." Lucas nodded, picking at a loose thread on the sweatshirt. "Is he going to come back?" Before the sheriff could answer, the curtain rustled and a tall woman in a dark suit entered. She introduced herself as Detective Sarah Reeves, speaking in the same careful tone adults had been using with Lucas all night. "Lucas, I need to ask you some questions about what happened. Is that okay?" He nodded again, though his hands gripped the edge of the bed tighter. Sheriff Anderson moved closer, a reassuring presence at his side. "Can you tell me about other times? Before tonight?" Detective Reeves asked, pulling out a small notebook. Lucas swallowed hard, looking down at his sock-covered feet. Sometimes James would get angry. He'd break things, make Mom cry." His voice grew smaller. "Last month, he threw Mom's favorite lamp at the wall because dinner was cold." The detective's pen scratched against paper. "Did you ever see him hurt your mom before tonight?" "2 times, Lucas whispered. "But Mom said it was accidents. She said James was just having a hard time at work." He looked up suddenly, eyes wide. "She made me promise not to tell anyone. Am I in trouble?" "No, buddy," Sheriff Anderson interjected quickly. "You're not in trouble at all. You helped your mom tonight. You were very brave." A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Through the gap in the curtain, Lucas caught sight of his Aunt Emma rushing toward the nurse's station, her long red hair wild and uncombed, still wearing what looked like pajamas under her winter coat. "My sister," she was saying, her voice urgent. "Sarah Mitchell. They brought her in about an hour ago." Moments later, the curtain between the bays was pulled back. Sarah Mitchell sat on the other bed, her face tear-stained but composed. A doctor was finishing up with her arm. Not broken, Lucas would later learn, but badly sprained. "Lucas," she breathed, reaching out her good arm toward him. "Baby, come here." He scrambled off his bed and into her embrace, careful of her injuries. She smelled like hospital antiseptic instead of her usual lavender perfume, but her arms were warm and safe. "I'm so sorry," she whispered into his hair. "I'm so sorry." Aunt Emma joined their embrace, forming a protective circle around Lucas. Over their shoulders, he could see Sheriff Anderson and Detective Reeves exchanging meaningful looks. "Mrs. Mitchell," Detective Reeves said gently, "we need to discuss your options. James made bail 20 minutes ago." The words sent a chill through the room. Sarah's arms tightened around Lucas. "Bail?" Emma's voice was sharp with disbelief. "How can he possibly dash?" "His father," Sarah said quietly. "His father's a retired judge. He has connections." Sheriff Anderson stepped forward, his face grim. "Which is why we need to move quickly. Mrs. Mitchell, you and Lucas can't go back to that house tonight. Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" "They're coming with me," Emma declared, no room for argument in her tone. "I have plenty of space, and I live in a secure building with cameras." Lucas felt his mother nod against his head, but something in the pit of his stomach told him this wasn't over. As if to confirm his fears, a nurse rushed into their bay, her face pale. "Sheriff? There's something you need to see." In the parking lot, Anderson followed her to the window. Even from the bed, Lucas could see the message keyed into the side of his mother's car, illuminated by the parking lot lights. This isn't over. The first light of dawn was just beginning to creep over the horizon, painting the hospital windows in shades of gray and pink. But for Lucas and his mother, the longest night of their lives wasn't over yet. Aunt Emma's apartment on the 11th floor of the Cornerstone building was everything their family home wasn't. Small but cozy, with walls painted in warm yellows and filled with the scent of cinnamon from her constant baking. For Lucas, who had spent the past week sleeping on a pull-out couch in the living room, it felt like a fortress high above the city. "Hot chocolate?" Emma asked, already reaching for the good cocoa powder, the kind with tiny marshmallows mixed in. Lucas nodded from his perch by the window, where he'd stationed himself every afternoon after school. From here, he could see 6 blocks in every direction. The sound of a key in the front door made him tense, but it was just his mother returning from her meeting with the lawyer. Sarah looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes partially hidden by makeup that couldn't quite conceal the fading bruises. "How did it go?" Emma asked softly, sliding a mug of hot chocolate toward Lucas. Sarah sank into the armchair, her hands shaking slightly as she removed her scarf. "The restraining order is in place, but..." She glanced at Lucas, then back to her sister. "Maybe we should discuss this later." "Mom," Lucas said, his voice stronger than he felt, "I'm not a baby. I want to know." Sarah and Emma exchanged looks. Finally, Sarah nodded. "You're right, sweetheart. You've been so brave through all of this. James's lawyer is..." They're trying to say it was a misunderstanding, that he was defending himself from the police. But that's not true. Lucas protested, hot chocolate forgotten. "He was hurting you. I heard everything." "I know, baby. And the police have your statement and the 911 call. Sheriff Anderson is making sure dash." A knock at the door cut her off. All 3 of them froze. Emma moved first, approaching the door cautiously. "Who is it?" "Sheriff Anderson, ma'am, and Detective Reeves." The tension in the room eased slightly, but didn't disappear completely. Emma checked the peephole before opening the door, revealing the 2 officers in plain clothes. "Mrs. Mitchell," Anderson said, his face grave. "We need to talk about James's court appearance tomorrow. There's been a development." Detective Reeves moved to the window, scanning the street below. "Your husband's father, Judge Cooper, has been making calls. He's trying to get the charges reduced." "Reduced?" Emma's voice rose. "He shot at police officers. After assaulting my mom," Lucas added, his small voice fierce. Anderson knelt down to Lucas's level. "You're absolutely right, son. And that's why we're here. We need to talk about tomorrow. The prosecutor wants Lucas to speak to the judge." Sarah stood up so quickly she knocked over her purse. "No, absolutely not. He's been through enough." "Sarah," Detective Reeves said gently, "Lucas's testimony could be crucial. Judge Martinez needs to understand the pattern of behavior, and Lucas has been witness to dash." A sharp rapping sound from the kitchen window made everyone jump. A branch, blown by the wind, had struck the glass. But Lucas noticed how quickly both officers had reached for their weapons, how his mother's face had gone pale. "There's something else," Anderson said after a moment. "James's previous marriage. We found some concerning information. His ex-wife had a son, about Lucas's age at the time." The room seemed to grow colder. Sarah sank back into her chair. "What about them?" "They moved to Arizona 6 years ago, after filing multiple domestic violence reports that were mysteriously dropped." Detective Reeves pulled out her notebook. "We've been trying to contact them, but dash," she was interrupted by Lucas's shout. "Mom!" The parking lot. Everyone rushed to the window. 11 floors below, a familiar black SUV was circling the building's parking lot. Even from this height, Lucas could make out James's silhouette behind the wheel. "He's not supposed to be here," Sarah whispered, clutching Lucas close. "The restraining order." "I'll call it in," Anderson said, already reaching for his radio. But before he could, the SUV stopped. James stepped out, looking directly up at their window. In his hand was something that caught the late afternoon sun with a metallic glint. Detective Reeves was already running for the door, gun drawn. "All units, respond to Cornerstone Building. Suspect James Cooper in violation of restraining order, potentially armed." Lucas couldn't tear his eyes away from the scene below. James was still staring up at their window, and even from 11 floors up, Lucas could see the smile spreading across his stepfather's face. It was the same smile he used to give before things would start breaking at home. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air, but James didn't move. He simply raised his hand, the metal object glinting again, and pointed it directly at their window. Tuesday morning dawned cold and gray at Boston General Children's Hospital. Lucas sat in Dr. Rachel Martinez's cheerfully decorated office, his legs dangling from an oversized armchair, staring at the fish tank that bubbled quietly in the corner. "Would you like to draw today?" Dr. Martinez asked, sliding a fresh sheet of paper and a box of colored pencils across her desk. She was younger than Lucas had expected a child psychologist to be, with kind eyes and a streak of blue in her dark hair that reminded him of the tropical fish swimming lazy circles behind her. The events from yesterday evening still played through his mind. James pointing something at their window, it turned out to be just his phone. Though the police had taken his violation of the restraining order seriously, the chaos of police cars flooding the parking lot, and James's laughter as they led him away. "Again. He keeps coming back," Lucas said quietly, selecting a black pencil. "Like a shadow." Dr. Martinez nodded, making a small note on her pad. "That must be scary." "Not for me," Lucas said, starting to draw. Dark lines began to form on the paper. "I'm scared for Mom. She pretends she's okay, but I hear her crying at night when she thinks I'm asleep." The pencil moved faster now, creating the outline of a house. Their house. "She jumps every time the phone rings. And yesterday at school, I saw a car that looked like his, and I couldn't breathe right. Ms. Peterson had to help me do the special breathing exercises again. Those panic attacks are normal after what you've been through," Dr. Martinez assured him. "Would you tell me about your drawing?" Lucas added more details. "Darkened windows, storm clouds overhead. It's our old house. I dream about it sometimes. In the dreams, I'm trying to call 911 again, but the phone doesn't work. Or I dial the numbers wrong. Or," he switched to a red pencil, "or I'm too late." A knock at the office door made them both look up. Dr. Martinez checked her watch and frowned. They still had 20 minutes left in their session. "Come in," she called. Sheriff Anderson stepped into the room, still in uniform, his face tight with concern. "Sorry to interrupt. Document Mrs. Mitchell asked me to check in. There's been another incident." Lucas's hand tightened around the red pencil until his knuckles went white. "What did he do?" Anderson sat in the chair next to Lucas, his bulk making the furniture seem even more child-sized. "Someone broke into your old house last night. Your mom's been staying with your aunt, so the house was empty. But what?" Lucas could feel his heart starting to race again. "They went into your room, son. Only your room." The red pencil snapped in Lucas's grip. Dr. Martinez leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "What was taken, Sheriff?" His clothes were scattered around, books thrown off shelves. But the only thing missing was... Anderson hesitated, looking at Lucas with sympathy. "Your dinosaur collection. All of them. The stuffed ones, the plastic toys, even the nightlight." Lucas felt the room spin slightly. Those dinosaurs had been his constant companions, especially during the bad nights. Some had been gifts from his real dad, before the cancer took him. Others were from his mom, given on birthdays and Christmases when money was tight but she'd saved up anyway. "We can't prove it was James," Anderson continued. "No fingerprints, no witnesses. But it was him," Lucas interrupted, his voice hollow. "He always said they were baby toys. That I needed to grow up and stop being scared." His hands were shaking now. He said real men aren't afraid of anything. Dr. Martinez moved around her desk, crouching beside Lucas's chair. Being afraid doesn't make you weak, Lucas. Being brave means doing the right thing even when you are afraid. Like you did when you called 911. The police are watching your aunt's building, Anderson added. And we've increased patrols around your school. He won't get near you again. But Lucas barely heard him. His eyes were fixed on his unfinished drawing, the dark house, the storm clouds, the red streaks that looked too much like the lights from police cars. In the margins, almost without realizing it, he'd drawn tiny dinosaurs. They were hiding in the shadows of the house, watching, waiting, just like he had done, just like he was still doing. A sudden blast of car horn from the street below made him jump. Dr. Martinez moved to the window, peering down at the hospital parking lot. Her sharp intake of breath drew Anderson to his feet. "What is it?" the sheriff demanded, joining her at the window. "A black SUV," she said quietly. "It just drove through the lot." Slowly, Lucas didn't need to look. He knew who it was, knew what it meant. James was sending a message. "I'm watching too." The session ended early, with Anderson escorting Lucas through the hospital's back entrance to where his mother waited in Aunt Emma's car. As they pulled away, Lucas caught a glimpse of something in the hospital's flower bed near the entrance. A small plastic T-Rex, one from his collection, positioned to face the door. Waiting, watching. The shadows were growing longer, and Lucas knew. The real storm hadn't even begun. The courthouse loomed over them like a stone giant, its granite steps slick with early morning frost. Lucas clutched his mother's hand as they climbed, surrounded by a protective circle of police officers. 2 weeks had passed since the dinosaur incident, and today was James's preliminary hearing. "Remember," Detective Reeves said quietly, walking beside them, "you only have to tell Judge Martinez what you saw and heard, just like we practiced." Lucas nodded, adjusting the too-tight collar of his dress shirt, the only one he had at Aunt Emma's apartment. His mother had wanted to go back to their house to get his better clothes, but the police had advised against it. More dinosaurs had appeared over the past 2 weeks. On his school playground, outside Emma's building, even in his mother's hospital locker. The courthouse lobby buzzed with morning activity. Lucas caught snippets of conversation that stopped abruptly as they passed, felt the weight of strangers' stares. His mother's hand tightened around his. "Sarah." The voice cut through the ambient noise like a knife. James stood near the courtroom doors with his lawyer and his father, Judge Cooper, a tall man with steel-gray hair and cold eyes. James looked different in his suit and tie, clean-shaven, almost like the man who had first started dating his mother 2 years ago. Almost. "You can't approach them." Detective Reeves stepped forward, one hand raised. "The restraining order doesn't apply inside the courthouse," James's lawyer interjected smoothly. "My client has every right to " "Hello, Lucas." James's voice was soft, almost gentle. The same voice he'd used when he first moved in, when he'd promised to be the best stepfather ever. "I missed you, buddy. Did you get my presents?" Lucas felt his mother tremble beside him. Sheriff Anderson moved between them and James, his hand resting casually near his weapon. "That's enough, Cooper. I was just being nice," James smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Making sure my stepson knows I'm thinking about him. About both of them." "All parties for Cooper versus the Commonwealth," a bailiff called out, opening the courtroom doors. They filed in, the tension crackling like static electricity. Lucas and his mother sat in the front row with Detective Reeves, while James and his team took their place at the defense table. Judge Martinez, a stern-looking woman with silver-streaked black hair, entered, and the proceedings began. The prosecutor presented the charges: domestic violence, assault with a deadly weapon, resisting arrest, violation of a restraining order. James sat calmly through it all, occasionally turning to smile at Lucas and Sarah. Then came the evidence. The 911 call recording filled the courtroom, Lucas's small, terrified voice making his mother cry silently beside him. Photos of her injuries. Police body cam footage of James firing at officers. The Commonwealth calls Lucas Mitchell to the stand, Lucas stood on shaking legs. As he passed the defense table, James reached out suddenly, his fingers brushing Lucas's sleeve. "Good luck, son." Everything happened at once. Sarah screamed. Anderson lunged forward. The bailiff moved to intercept. And Lucas felt something small and hard pressed into his palm during that brief contact. He opened his hand as he reached the witness stand. It was a small plastic dinosaur, one from his collection. But this one had been modified. Its tiny plastic claws had been sharpened to needle points. Its eyes colored blood red with marker. Lucas looked up at James, who was still smiling that empty smile. And in that moment, something inside Lucas, something that had been bending and stretching for months, finally snapped. "He did it on purpose," Lucas shouted, holding up the dinosaur. "He's been leaving them everywhere. He's trying to scare us. He hurt my mom, and now he's trying to hurt me and Dash." "Order." Judge Martinez banged her gavel. "Bailiff." Approached the witness Dash, but Lucas wasn't finished. 2 years of fear and silence came pouring out. "He said he'd kill her if I ever told. He said no one would believe us. He breaks things and then says it's Mom's fault." He dashed. James stood up suddenly, his face transforming. "You little liar." "Sarah, control your brat before I dash." The mask had slipped. In front of the judge, the lawyers, everyone, James Cooper showed his true face. The courtroom erupted into chaos. James vaulted over the defense table, reaching for Lucas. Sheriff Anderson tackled him mid-leap. Sarah ran to the witness stand, wrapping Lucas in her arms. Judge Martinez was shouting for order. And through it all, Lucas held onto that twisted dinosaur toy, physical proof of the monster who had invaded their lives. As officers wrestled James to the ground, he kept screaming, "You're dead, both of you. You hear me? This isn't over." But looking down at his stepfather handcuffed on the courtroom floor, Lucas finally understood something. It was over. The breaking point had come at last. The sunlight streamed through the high windows of Dr. Martinez's office, casting long shadows across her desk where an array of Lucas's drawings lay spread out. 3 weeks had passed since the courthouse incident, and each drawing told part of the story. "Your artwork has changed," Dr. Martinez observed, holding up his latest piece. No longer dark houses and storm clouds, but a garden. In the center stood 3 figures: Lucas, his mother, and Sheriff Anderson, who had become a frequent visitor at Aunt Emma's apartment. "Mom's different too," Lucas said, adding color to a new drawing. "She laughs more now. Real laughs, not the pretend ones." Dr. Martinez nodded, making notes in her ever-present pad. "And the nightmares? Still come sometimes." Lucas paused, choosing his words carefully. "But now I know they're just dreams. James can't hurt us anymore." The preliminary hearing had turned into an immediate arrest when James violated the restraining order in front of the entire court. His father's influence couldn't help him this time. Not with dozens of witnesses, including a judge, who had seen his true nature emerge. But that wasn't the only consequence of that day. Sheriff Anderson said they found more evidence in our old house. Lucas continued, switching to a blue pencil. "Hidden cameras. In the walls. James was watching us even before." Even before that night, the discovery had led to additional charges, and more importantly, had prompted James's ex-wife in Arizona to finally come forward. Her testimony, along with her son's, had painted a pattern of behavior that stretched back years. "Does that make you angry?" Dr. Martinez asked gently. Knowing he was watching, Lucas considered this, adding details to his drawing, a butterfly garden, like the one Sheriff Anderson had helped them plant at their new apartment complex across town. "Not anymore, because we were watching too. Mom was watching for signs of his anger. I was watching for ways to help her. And now the police are watching him." A knock at the door announced the end of their session. Sarah entered, looking years younger than she had just a month ago. The bruises had faded, but more importantly, the fear in her eyes had diminished. "Ready for lunch, sweetheart?" she asked Lucas. "Emma's trying a new recipe she found online. Something with dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets." Lucas smiled, gathering his art supplies. The mention of dinosaurs no longer sent chills down his spine. They were just toys again, not weapons of fear. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Martinez held up the garden drawing. "May I keep this one? For my wall?" Lucas nodded, then hesitated. "Can I add one more thing?" He took the drawing back and carefully added a final detail. A small security camera mounted on the garden wall, its lens watching over the peaceful scene. Below it, he wrote in careful letters, "Sometimes watching isn't scary. Sometimes it keeps you safe. That's beautiful, Lucas." His mother said softly, tears in her eyes. As they walked to the car, Lucas noticed a police cruiser parked across the street, one of the regular patrols that still monitored their movements. But instead of feeling afraid, he felt protected. Watched over, not watched. Their new apartment building came into view as they drove home. Its modern security systems and friendly doorman, a far cry from their old house on Maple Street. In the garden they'd planted, tiny green shoots were just beginning to emerge from the soil. Lucas pressed his face against the car window, watching the city scroll past. In the reflection, he could see his mother's smile, real, unafraid, healing. They were both healing. But as they turned the final corner, Lucas caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold. A black SUV, different from James's but similar enough, idling at the curb near their building. And suddenly he remembered James's last words in the courtroom. "This isn't over." Was it really over? Or was this just the calm before another storm? The black SUV turned out to belong to Michelle Cooper, James's first wife, who had flown in from Arizona with her son Tyler for the upcoming trial. Lucas watched from the lobby as Sheriff Anderson greeted them, noticing how Tyler, now 13, flinched when the automatic doors closed too loudly behind them. "He's just like you described," Michelle was saying to Sarah, her voice soft but steady. "James? He always targeted the gentle ones first." Tyler stood slightly apart from the group, his lanky frame hunched as if trying to disappear. Lucas approached him carefully, the way he'd learned to approach scared animals at the shelter where Aunt Emma volunteered. "I have games upstairs," Lucas offered. "And Mom made cookies." Tyler's eyes darted to his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead, honey. We need to talk to the prosecutors anyway." In Lucas's temporary bedroom at Aunt Emma's, Tyler gradually began to relax. As they played Mario Kart, stories started spilling out, stories that echoed Lucas's own experiences with frightening familiarity. "He took my baseball cards," Tyler said quietly during a race. "Said I loved them more than him. Said I needed to learn about priorities." He gripped the controller tighter. Then he started with the cameras. Lucas paused the game. "In the walls?" Tyler nodded. "Mom found one in my bathroom. That's when we finally ran. But he followed us to Phoenix. Kept showing up at my school, my baseball games. Left gifts. Dinosaurs for me," Lucas said. "Baseball cards for you?" "Yeah." "But he'd written things on them. Threats. Promises." Tyler's voice cracked. "Nobody believed us. His dad, the judge, he made everything go away. Until now." Down the hall, they could hear the adults talking in low, urgent voices. Words like pattern of behavior and additional charges drifted through the walls. "Did you know," Tyler asked suddenly, "that he did this before us? There was another family in Connecticut. A mom and 2 kids. They disappeared one day. Just vanished." Lucas felt his stomach drop. "Did he?" "No one could prove anything. But after I saw what he did to your mom on the news, I found their old social media. The mom posted about missing toys before they disappeared. Just like us." A knock at the bedroom door made them both jump. Detective Reeves entered, her face grim. "Boys, we need to talk." James escaped custody during transport to the county jail. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Lucas heard his mother's sharp intake of breath from the hallway, saw Tyler's face go pale. "He had help," Reeves continued. "His father, Judge Cooper, was arrested an hour ago. He orchestrated the whole thing. But James is out there, and we have reason to believe She was cut off by the building's fire alarm blaring to life. Through the window, Lucas could see people evacuating onto the street below. And there, across the road, a familiar figure stood watching. James had shed his prison jumpsuit for civilian clothes, but his smile, that empty, terrifying smile, was the same as ever. "Get down!" Reeves shouted, drawing her weapon as the first gunshot shattered the window. In the chaos that followed, as SWAT teams surrounded the building and helicopters thundered overhead, Lucas found himself huddled in the bathroom with Tyler, listening to the chaos outside. Both boys recognized the familiar sound of James's laughter echoing up from the street. "He won't stop," Tyler whispered. "He never stops." But Lucas, clutching his mother's old emergency phone, now with a new battery and number, felt something different this time. Not fear, but determination. "No," he said, dialing 911 for the second time in his young life. "But this time there are too many of us. Too many witnesses. Too many voices." The dispatcher's voice came through clear and strong. 911, what's your emergency?" Lucas took a deep breath, hearing the echo of sirens approaching. "He's back. And this time we're ready for him." The next hours unfolded like scenes from a movie, but there was nothing entertaining about the real fear that permeated Aunt Emma's apartment building. SWAT teams had evacuated most residents, but Lucas, Tyler, their mothers, and the officers remained trapped on the 11th floor. James had somehow managed to block the main stairwell with a small fire, and he controlled the view of the emergency exit. "He's playing with us," Michelle whispered, her arms wrapped protectively around Tyler, like he always did, making it into a game. Sarah sat between Lucas and the window, though the SWAT team had moved them all into the hallway away from any potential line of fire. Sheriff Anderson crouched nearby, his radio crackling with updates. "Team 2 in position," a voice reported. "Target still visible on Morton Street. He's just standing there, Sheriff. Smiling." "He's waiting for something," Tyler said suddenly, his voice stronger than it had been all day. "This is like Phoenix. He always waits until the building's lights went out. Power's cut," someone shouted from down the hall. Emergency lights cast an eerie red glow through the corridor. The cameras, Lucas realized, remembering how James had always been obsessed with watching, with control. The building's security cameras would have gone dark. Sheriff Anderson immediately began barking orders into his radio, but Lucas was already moving. He darted away from his mother's grasp and ran toward Aunt Emma's apartment. "Lucas, no!" Sarah called after him, but he had to get something. Had to prove what he knew. He reached Emma's desk just as the first heavy footsteps sounded on the fire escape. Lucas grabbed what he needed and ran back to the group, where officers were now positioning themselves at both ends of the hallway. "He disabled the cameras because he doesn't want to be watched," Lucas explained breathlessly, holding up Aunt Emma's old digital camera. "He only likes it when he's the one doing the watching." Tyler caught on immediately. "That's why he ran in Phoenix. Mom started recording everything he did." A window shattered somewhere down the hall. James's voice, eerily calm, floated through the darkness. "Hide and seek, boys? Just like old times?" But Lucas stood his ground, camera raised. The first flash illuminated James in the emergency exit doorway, catching his expression of surprise. "No more hiding," Lucas said, taking another photo as James raised his gun. "No more secrets." The next few moments exploded in chaos. James lunged forward just as SWAT teams burst through both ends of the hallway. Lucas kept taking photos, flash after flash, each one freezing a fragment of James's final unraveling. The last photo would later become crucial evidence in court. James Cooper, his face contorted in rage, being tackled by Sheriff Anderson as his weapon clattered to the floor. In the background, visible through a broken window, news helicopters illuminated the scene with powerful spotlights. The man who had terrorized them through watching was finally the one being watched. By everyone. As officers led James away in handcuffs, he turned back one last time. But Lucas noticed something different in his stepfather's eyes now. "Fear. You did it," Tyler said quietly, standing beside Lucas as they watched James being loaded into a police van 11 floors below. "You broke his power." Sarah wrapped her arms around both boys, and Lucas felt his mother's tears falling into his hair. But they were different tears now. Tears of relief. of ending, of freedom. The night wasn't over. There would be statements to give, evidence to process, a trial to face. But as Lucas looked at the camera in his hands, at the proof of James's final defeat, he knew one thing for certain. The shadows couldn't hurt them anymore. Not when they had finally stepped into the light. 1 year later, the community garden behind the Healing Heart Center bloomed with early summer flowers. Lucas, now 8, carefully watered the dinosaur-shaped garden bed he'd helped design, part of the center's therapy program for children affected by domestic violence. "Looking good, buddy," Sheriff Anderson said, approaching with 2 cups of lemonade. He was off duty, as he often was when he visited the center. Over the past year, he'd become something of a mentor to Lucas, teaching him about police work, justice, and most importantly, healing. "Tyler's coming to visit next week," Lucas announced, accepting the lemonade. His baseball team made it to regionals in Boston. "I heard," Anderson smiled. "Your mom and Michelle have been planning the celebration dinner for days." The mention of his mother made Lucas glance toward the center's main building, where Sarah now worked as a victim advocate, helping other families escape situations like the one they'd survived. She was stronger now, her laughter came easier, and the shadows rarely crossed her face anymore. James's trial had ended 6 months ago with multiple life sentences. Not just for what he'd done to Lucas's family and Tyler's, but also for the family in Connecticut. They had been found alive, hidden in Arizona, and their testimony had been the final nail in James's coffin. His father, Judge Cooper, would spend his remaining years in federal prison for obstruction of justice and aiding an escape. "Sheriff?" Lucas asked, setting down his watering can. "Do you think he'll ever get out?" Anderson's face turned serious. "No, son. He won't. The evidence you collected with that camera, combined with Tyler's testimony and the other families. He's never hurting anyone again." Lucas nodded, kneeling to pull a weed from around his plants. Among the flowers, small plastic dinosaurs stood guard. Not the ones from his old collection, but new ones. Happy ones. Protected ones. "Someone new moved into our old house on Maple Street," he said conversationally. "A family with kids. I saw them yesterday when we drove past. And how did that make you feel?" Lucas considered this, remembering the young girl playing on the front lawn, her father pushing her on a swing set where his old dinosaur-themed swing used to be. "Good," he decided. "The house feels happy now. The shadows are gone." Sarah emerged from the center, waving as she approached. She looked beautiful in her summer dress, her face bright with purpose. Behind her walked Dr. Martinez, who still saw Lucas weekly, though now their sessions focused more on growth than trauma. "Ready for the support group, sweetheart?" Sarah asked. Lucas had recently started sharing his story with other kids at the center, helping them find their own courage. "Almost," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out his mother's old iPhone, the one he'd used to make that life-changing 911 call. It was deactivated now, more of a memoir than a device. He placed it carefully among the dinosaurs in the garden. "What are you doing?" Anderson asked curiously. "Planting it," Lucas explained. "Like a seed. Maybe it'll grow into something that helps other kids be brave." Sarah wiped tears from her eyes as she hugged him. Dr. Martinez made a note on her ever-present pad, smiling. Later that evening, as Lucas got ready for bed in their new home, a warm, secure apartment filled with family photos and children's artwork, he paused at his window. The city lights twinkled beyond, and somewhere out there, other children might be facing their own shadows. But he knew now that shadows couldn't survive in the light. All it took was one small voice, one moment of courage, one call for help to start breaking the darkness. On his bedside table, next to a photo of him with his mother, Tyler, and Sheriff Anderson at the courthouse, sat a single plastic dinosaur. Not a weapon, not a threat, just a toy. Just as it should be. Lucas climbed into bed, no longer needing to check his closet or under the bed. No longer listening for footsteps or breaking glass. The night was quiet, peaceful, safe, and somewhere in a community garden, among the flowers and hope growing in a dinosaur-shaped bed, an old iPhone lay buried like a time capsule, a reminder that even the smallest among us can roar loud enough to shake the world.